All right, we're going to transition to the Oscars, and in particular, mental health Oscars. With the Oscars premiering this Sunday, we thought we'd stray from the usual predictions, which you can get a lot of places, and have a little bit of fun and get into a little more depth of psychology. Today's discussion will be our own little mini award show, spotlighting films or performances that we feel embody a mental health issue or psychological concept. So we're going to talk about each of these. Our picks are going to be chosen for the most part either from a Best Picture nominated film or from a nominated performance. And I actually am going to break the rules on the first category. I know, I'm a rebel. That's how I roll.
What? I was sneezing.
Dave is a rebel.
You are such a white man. Like, here's the rules, but
Wow.
I'm going to start us off.
And by the way, I gave the rules and then I broke it.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, when we were prepping for this, let's put this as the parameters and then I have to break it. But when I was really preparing for it, I couldn't get around it for the first category. But the first category is, let's give some kind of award for the best depiction of mental illness or a mental health condition. And we'll start with Emma Kate. This is from 2019 films.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
2019 films.
I am going to cheat maybe as well.
Oh, no.
Because truthfully, I didn't feel like there was a great depiction. I think I'm going with the Joker for mental illness because there's so many things about his history of trauma, both emotional and physical abuse. He's in counseling. He's on multiple medications. He's clearly got a tic that is maybe neurological, so to speak, with the laughing. And he's obviously delusional. There are a lot of scenes where he's not within reality and you can't tell what's actually going on, and then that turns into psychosis. So he's really ridiculously depressed, and I think that's fair, but what I am critical of is that from my perspective, they kind of made that about him being crazy. And it's like in what we talked about earlier in our Being Human segment, where it's like we are attributing mental health with aggression and aggressive tendencies. And again, I think it was the best out of what I saw in the films, but I still didn't quite like it. I like the movie, for the record, just not that aspect.
Frank, your pick.
I'm going to break the rules.
Go for it.
I'm going to go back to Tony Stark. His story arc from start to finish, and not just with Endgame, in terms of the portrayal of narcissism and ultimately getting to a place where I think the narcissism served him, but he was able to get past that with his relationship with Captain America and having a child and getting outside of himself, I think was, it was a truly, the whole arc, just an inspiring performance, but I don't understand why he could not have been nominated. It's very frustrating, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's mental illness, it's a personality disorder, but his sacrifice at the end was really amazing to me.
Jonathan.
Who would have thought of all of us, I would be the rule follower amongst us?
It's really rare.
So
Sad.
I'm going to pick Leonardo DiCaprio as aging TV star Rick Dalton in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think he is a textbook alcoholic. I think an argument could be made that he is suffering either from adjustment disorder or depression. You see this guy self-medicating, self-loathing. You see that erratic behavior. He's having difficulty accepting life just with what's going on. It's clear, to me at least, that there's some degree of false bravado that now has sort of been chipped away as his time in the spotlight has kind of gone away. But I really think the clearest one to me is his drinking problem. And there's a wonderful scene in his trailer where he...
It's my favorite scene in the movie.
He is just going at himself. There's such self-loathing and self-hatred, and yet we see later on in the film, after he's really had a captivating performance with the television series, he's back at it. Like, he's just back at the bottle. This guy has such an inability to control his emotions and his drinking pattern. So
I love that. Yeah,
it's a good call.
It's a great pick. Okay, so my pick is Shia LaBeouf's portrayal of his real life but fictional dad. In other words, in the movie, their names are not Shia and whatever his dad's name is. They're given different names. They're different characters, but it clearly is Shia and his real life dad. And in the movie, the dad's name is James Lort, and he is a rodeo clown, former, once wanted to be in show business, and is maybe the best portrayal I've seen in years of a wounded narcissist in film. There are some scenes that are just so outstanding about this portrayal. One of them is they're living in basically a motel, a rundown kind of motel, and at the same time, the kid character is on the set of a TV show. They don't say they might not say what the name of the TV show was, but it was Even Stevens in Shia's real life case. And they're still living in this motel. And obviously the dad is not able to provide for him in other ways. He's kind of living through this kid. And the mom has wanted the kid to have an adult mentor, a male mentor. So they've gone through Big Brothers. And so the dad is so jealous of this other man being the mentor in this kid's life. And there's one scene where all this sort of narcissistic rage just kind of comes out. And it is like a brilliant piece of acting. So I would say I'm going to give it to Shia LaBeouf for his portrayal of James Lort in Honey Boy. Okay.
Is that available for Amazon yet?
I don't think so, but you can check. But I think it's coming
I'd like to watch
pretty
it.
soon. It is, I'll say one more thing about the movie. Before I watched it, the things I'd read are, this is a movie that you'll appreciate, but you won't like. It's a hard movie to watch. To me, none of that was true. I love the movie. I thought it was not hard to watch. I mean, there are parts of it that are gripping, but it's just, I was just so drawn in by it. There are three great performances and one really great performance. So let's move on to the second category. The next category is the most resilient character. Most resilient character. Who is a character in an Oscar-nominated film that you feel like embodied resilience? We'll start again with Emma Kate.
I'll go. I very clearly thought Corporal Schofield in 1917 was hands down resilient. He was a World War I British soldier trying to deliver this message to prevent an attack involving 1,600 men. And I mean, this guy just went through the ringer with stuff, but he, obviously, spoiler, was able to do it. And it was just intense. I mean, the man fell off a waterfall, for Christ's sake. Like, he fell off a waterfall. Like, so. I was just
what, you havenent?
I know, right?
Come on,
I mean,
snowflake.
We all have. Let's be real. And it was in a box with a dog and a cat. Milo notice. Anyone? Okay.
Your pick, Frank.
I cannot tell you the name of the kid, but it was the kid from Jojo Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
You mean Jojo?
Jojo?
You mean Jojo?
Oh. That was his name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Did you see the movie?
I saw the movie by myself. Thank you, McKay.
Oh, you didn't? We
What?
saw that with you.
Yeah, we were with you with that.
Wait, what was the one I saw by myself?
Oh, this was so
Parasite.
rude.
Oh, boy.
So
yeah,
rude.
yeah, yeah.
Get
Yeah.
your
Yeah, that's right.
anger
Parasite.
The
correct.
vote for
Parasite.
the least
Get your
resilient
correct
panelist
anger.
here on the podcast.
Okay. It's been a long year, people. But anyway, watching him go through that period of time and like imagining that experience and be like, how do you reconsider the way you look at the world? I thought it was great. I thought it was an amazing performance, great movie. But the idea of growing up as a child during that time period and coming out okay after it is impressive to me. So that's my vote.
Mm-hmm. And a great performance too, we'll say, for that kid.
It is.
Really great kid performance. Okay, Jonathan.
Well, I'd love to say Brad Pitt as Cliff Booth, who fought off Bruce Lee and the Charles Manson murderers. That would be the comical resilient person.
That'd be awesome.
But, if I was being really honest, and I love both of your guys' picks, I totally agree. But I would also add Joe March from Little Women. You have a writer trying to navigate the world of men whose sister burns her transcript when she's young, whose best friend, childhood friend, marries that same sister, who, in a lot of ways, spoiler alert for those of you who are not familiar with Little Women at this point, whose sister dies. There's just all of this adversity that she faces, but she never wavers from the fact that she truly believes she is meant to write and that she is a writer, and the movie is very satisfying as it follows that arc for her.
In most of these categories, I've written 2 or 3 options because I know that I go last on the panel and that I will usually have mine taken. And first of all, I'll say that Emma Kate took my first one, which was Schofield in 1917. I thought, my guess was that Jonathan Hedderly was going to pick another one on my list, which is the family in Parasite.
Right.
I thought that was cool.
I tend to like to have happy endings with resiliency.
Yeah, I know. That doesn't seem
Yeah.
super resilient.
I mean, I guess if you survive your house being flooded away and
Sitting on a
and you're
toilet.
resourceful enough to hide from a very horrific crime. So,
Sure.
I mean, sure, but I don't know if that's subliminal racism that Dave thought I'd pick the Korean film on the list.
I know
I don't
that
think
you.
it's subliminal. I just think it's just pure racism.
It's overt racism, yeah. And I also know that it was your favorite movie. So my pick is also one that the outcome for the character wasn't good, but not at his own hand, or not because of. But this is an interesting pick for me. But I'm going to pick Jimmy Hoffa in The Irishman, Al Pacino's character. I thought it was okay. I mean, even though we know the outcome wasn't good, if you follow the arc of this guy, it's like, you talk about a resilient dude. It's like people are coming at him on all levels at every angle, and he's just batting it down. And there's a scene which really sort of embodies that, and it's in there on purpose, where a guy comes into the courtroom and tries to shoot him, and then he stands up after they wrestle the guy down. You've seen it. They use this for clips a lot too, and he'll say, if a guy comes at you with a gun, then you go at him. If he comes at you with a knife, you run away, that kind of thing. And he's like kind of doing this little in-service on how to handle like somebody coming at you,
How to be a gangster.
yeah. And the point of that was, like, this is what you have to be thinking about in your life, about people coming at you with all this adversity. And this is how I live my life. And so in that sense, from just there are aspects of resilience that he does not embody, but the one about that being tough-minded, of pushing through adversity, of coming, despite the odds, coming out on top, he's a good picture of that. So I'll stick with Jimmy Hoffa. All right.
Good pick, Dave.
Next one. We're going to talk about the concept of growth mindset. Let me set that up a little bit before we talk about the best picture of growth mindset. A growth mindset is an idea that was really uncovered by a researcher at Stanford named Carol Dweck. She wrote a great book called Mindset. Highly recommend it. She basically says there are 2 types of mindsets, a fixed and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is, this is just the hand I'm dealt, good or bad. So I'm good at math. I'm a fast runner. I'm not very good with public speaking, whatever it might be, good or bad. And when people have a fixed mindset, they tend to think that's just the hand I'm dealt. And what is interesting with a fixed mindset is even when it's positive, in other words, if someone says, I'm good at fill in the blank, when that gets challenged and they're not as good as someone else, they tend to fold and they tend to collapse. Whereas a growth mindset is, well, I'm not that good at math yet, so I have to work harder at it. Or I'm a good basketball player, but to be a great basketball player, I have to work really hard. It's always this sense of, I'm here, and with effort, I can get here. And those folks tend to do better in every measured area. They tend to do better in career. They tend to do better in relationships. They tend to do better, you name it. And it predicts a lot of good things. So we're going to talk about growth mindset. So best picture or depiction of growth mindset in 2019 film. Again, Emma Kate.
I'm going to do one that's kind of not what you would expect, because a lot of times I think people think of intelligence or learning as part of the growth or fixed mindset. And I'm going with Jojo Rabbit. I actually think
good
he
one.
showed a lot of fixed mindsets, considering he was like, I am a Jewish nationalist, and that is it. And then he finds out there's a sweet Jewish teen who's not really so sweet at first, being hidden by his mother in their home. And he has to decide, all right, should I write this book that I want to write about all the things I know about Jewish people, which is really nothing.
Yeah. All their horns and how they eat each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
Well, it's in the movie.
But, no,
Go
it
there.
is. It is. But then he actually ends up investigating and saying, you know what? I am going to go. He was going through this conflict and talking to his imaginary Hitler friend and saying,
Don't we all?
I mean, sure, right. But he ended up caring for her. And so you could just see how at first he started very fixed, and then he really evolved and was able to thrive and challenge, or grow from the challenge that he experienced. And then they ended up being really close when, spoiler, his mother died and he ran back to her. So I loved that film.
Good one. Frank.
I
It's never good when he laughs.
No.
Right. I'm
Never,
nervous.
never,
I'm nervous.
Never.
Never good.
I'm going to tell you who has a growth mindset is the Joker. He's on the bus. He's got a little card that says, I have a mental condition. And ultimately, he says, you know what? Screw it. And he becomes
A murderer?
a murderer. I mean, sure. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
That.
I mean, that's
yeah.
a fact.
Aren't
It's
we
a
all?
You know,
fact.
the way we do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he kills people, but he gets to this place of saying, you know, I'm going to be who I'm going to be, and I gave a talk about 2 weeks ago on growth mindset.
Oh,
And
boy.
did you use the Joker?
Did you use this?
I actually did not use
No.
the
Okay,
Joker.
good.
No,
Okay,
no,
kudos. Thank you. Did you really?
No, I did.
Okay.
Maybe I did.
I think he
don't
did.
know.
I think you
I
did.
think he did.
Who knows?
I think he did.
I think he did. And this is not a growth mindset, for the record.
Well, I will say, or I guess it brings up an interesting point. Can you have a growth mindset for evil, right? Can a growth mindset lead you to
Yeah, I mean, I don't
bad
think a
things?
growth mindset is about good or evil. It's about development and growth, and I think the Joker did that. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
Okay.
I guess he grew in bad
You
ways.
guys know where to find Frank Gaskell if you want him to give a talk
Yeah.
on resiliency.
Just follow me on Twitter. Yeah.
Wow.
There you go.
Okay.
Jonathan, bail us out.
Well, I agree with Jojo Rabbit. I actually would pick Charlie, the Adam Driver character in Marriage Story. Because he's Adam Driver, I like him, but he exhibits a lot of unlikable characteristics, and he's having difficulty accepting the divorce and accepting that his wife is going to live in LA and that their son is now going to be shared with custody. And it's really a very brief final scene, but you get glimpses that he is showing some growth and flexibility at the end, where he is picking up a job in LA to teach, that he is being very collaborative with his ex-wife, Nicole, and her boyfriend. So you see these glimpses of him being able to accept and shift, even though the first 2 hours is really about his inability or unwillingness to do so.
That's a good one. Mine is actually from Ford versus Ferrari, which was Oscar nominated for Best Picture. I probably wouldn't put it on the top of the list of Best Picture nominated films, but it's a true story, and there is a character played by Matt Damon named Carroll Shelby, and he is a former race car driver who then becomes a race car designer, and he is a great picture of pure growth mindset of, if this car isn't the best, we have to keep working at it. If this situation isn't optimal, we have to keep, and that it's always better to make it, or always possible to make it better, but we have to work really hard and we have to push into that. And I think it was a great depiction of a growth mindset in a film character. All right, let's move through the next two categories, the final two, a little quicker, and let's get to most psychologically complex character. Emma Kate.
The Joker, period. I think that's obvious for a lot of people.
Yeah, pretty complex.
Yep.
Frank.
I'm just gonna go with that. The Joker.
Wow.
That's my pick.
For Jonathan.
Yeah, it'd be hard to argue against the Joker, although I would say Parasite has the messiest cast of characters because the film does a masterful job of not painting anybody as a villain or as a protagonist. There's a lot of microaggressions. There's a lot of ways of envy and oversight that really makes looking at them as such complex characters trapped in systematic kind of classism and oppression.
That's good. I have three, but I'll tell you, the first one was one that you picked for the previous category. I actually think Adam Driver's character in Marriage Story is a pretty complex character. And I think that's, and his arc is pretty complex. So I think that was a good one. He starts, and he's likable, but he's that kind of like there's underneath it, there's that narcissism, and then he sort of has to get out of his own way and comes to a pretty good spot. I think that's pretty cool. Ford versus Ferrari, the other leading character was Ken Miles, played by Christian Bale, who's this hot-headed, impetuous, but highly talented guy. And he sort of, in some ways, is self-destructive, but in other ways is determined. And it's played with a lot of complexity, as you might guess, by Christian Bale. But my pick would be Amy in Little Women. I think that Florence Pugh's depiction of her and how she was written and portrayed. There's so many facets to that character that there are points in there where you're like, is she like a borderline personality? And then other times where you're like, well, she's just a very, there's a tenderness here. And there's you see all these sort of sides to her in that film. So I think that's really cool. All right. Last category. Most interesting relationship. And we use the word interesting because it could be good or bad. It could go in any direction. Emma Kate.
I feel like in a way I'm cheating on this one too, because I'm actually going to say Parasite and the dynamic between the Park family, the Kim family, and then the housekeeper's family. Because obviously the housekeeper, her husband was living in the bunker below their home. Spoiler, sorry. And then the Park family being this affluent family, in a weird way, they were kind of dependent on these people doing their work for them. So even some of like the parenting, it kind of felt like. And then the Kim family, here they are being parasitic and relying on, the means of this family to provide for them. So I just thought that was a really interesting dynamic.
Frank.
Well, you took mine, Emma Kate, so now I'm going to shift to second place, which is the Joker and his imaginary relationship with the girl down the hall.
Good one.
Which, unfortunately, I did not see coming. I was completely blown away by that. While I think everybody else saw it coming, but I thought that was just very, very cool how you build a relationship up in your imagination that's not real.
Very cool. Jonathan.
There are two that stand out. I think Jojo and the girl that's hiding in his attic, Elsa, they have a very tender and complex relationship. They start out as enemies. There's a softening on both sides, and they both really have to endure tragedies of different sorts. So there's a shared trauma that they kind of bond through. But I just love Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt's friendship in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, who would not want a best friend that drives you around,
right?
Especially when you're hammered, that saves your wife and you from Charles Manson murderers, right? I mean, and then, goes to the hospital. I mean, I want a friend like that. You guys have definitely fallen short as friends.
I'm sorry.
I'm with you on that.
You have not saved me from mass murderers yet.
Just talk to Evan.
That I know of.
Talk to Evan.
That was top of my list. I also, in Jojo Rabbit, I also like the relationship between mother and son also. I love the relationships between the sisters in Little Women. And the one that I'm going to pick is the relationship between Scarlett Johansson and Laura Dern in Marriage Story. I like that relationship because the whole film pivoted on that relationship, and it changed the trajectory of their lives in many ways. So that to me was a really critical relationship and a good depiction of the importance of voices speaking to you, and for good or bad, how that can influence you in your life. So good story. A lot of psychological.
Yeah, I would add that probably that's my favorite movie of the year.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, Frank.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Nothing like a badass divorce lawyer, huh? Can I get an amen?
I'm
Can I get an
pretty
amen?
sure.
Art imitating.
Pretty
what?
sure Emma Kate just dissociated.
I did. I was like,
He just went total blank.
nailed in.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up for this edition of the Shrink Tank Podcast. I'm Dave Verhagen in Nashville, signing off for Emma Kate Reif, Frank Gaskell, and Jonathan Hederley in Charlotte. Tell all your friends about us and make it a great week.